Hello, thanks for joining us on Encore. Coming up in today's film show, we take a stroll down that famous boulevard. It's time for the Champs Elysées Film Festival here in Paris. Singaporean prison drama Apprentice provides a chilling insight into capital punishment.
You'll be handling rehab prisoners.
And what if going to school didn't involve a classroom or a teacher? Clara Bellar's documentary Being and Becoming looks at an alternative approach to education. The actress and filmmaker worked with Spielberg and Rohmer before she got behind the camera. Clara's here in the studio to tell us more. For all that, I'm joined by Lisa Nesselson, our film critic. Hello. And Clara Bellar, thanks so much for joining us. Now, just to give you a short introduction, you're a French actress, singer and filmmaker, currently living in Los Angeles, among other places as well. Clara's worked with the late Rohmer on Les Rendezvous de Paris, and she played a memorable robot in Steven Spielberg's sci-fi tale AI. When her son was a toddler, Clara began to wonder whether a formal education was the best way to raise a happy child. Exploring that question led her to her documentary Être, devenir, or Being and Becoming, which has been playing every week for 2 years here at a cinema in Paris. Clara, it's been an amazing word-of-mouth success, Being and Becoming. There aren't many cities where a theatre would put on the same film for 2 years. How do you think that happened?
Well, that's the magic of Paris, isn't it? The world capital of cinema. The Cinéma Saint-André-des-Arts has been playing the film for 2 years continuously. And I think the big difference with a place like LA or New York, where they would ask that you have, say, $20,000 minimum in ads in newspapers and magazines. No, she trusted that she gave us a shot to build a word of mouth naturally. And it happened. So, of course, she needs to have an audience. If there's less than 20 people at each show, she can't keep the film. She needs to pay her bills like everyone else. But there's this trust, and that's amazing. And so it's Paris, but it's all over France, and also screenings and theatrical releases in 30 countries. Where it's been like that, it's been very much a guerrilla filmmaking, but also distribution, a collaborative distribution, a very different model, which is very much in harmony with the values of the film.
Yeah, there's certainly plenty of buzz about it. So before we go any further, let's take a look at some of the children involved in the film in this clip of Being and Becoming.
If you're doing abstract, it could be like loads of squares, say, one's big and one's small. You wouldn't know if that's perspective or one just being small and one being big.
When people think that unschooling is revolutionary and scary, they forget that that's most of human history was unschooling.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Aaron didn't learn to read until age 12, while his sister Rachel was devouring books at 3. Their parents had let them learn at their own pace. We were wondering if we'd be capable of such trust.
And then I wrote a play.
You spoke earlier about the trust between you and the programmer owners of the cinema that's been showing the film for 2 years. This topic of trust keeps coming up in your film.
It's a theme.
How, as a parent, do you just have confidence and trust that a child is going to find their way and find out what interests them?
Well, parents have told me the hardest thing is not for learning to occur, because we're learning machines as human beings. It just happens by living. The hardest thing in unschooling is deschooling ourselves as parents, because we're so formatted to believe, there's this mindset that you need to be taught to learn, which is absolutely untrue. So for us to let go of that and the pressure of society, grandparents, neighbors who are pointing out and asking, what's going on, there's so much pressure. That causes a lot of stress for families. And then in France, there are verifications, there are inspectors that come once a year. And some of them don't know about unschooling. They don't even know the law sometimes. The law says that you must check that children get instruction, but you're not supposed to test or compare them. But some of them don't know or respect the law, and that causes additional pressure to have to justify.
I have to say, having gone to mostly traditional schools, one of the things that happens in a traditional school and schoolyard, for better or worse, is that there's some uncomfortable situations. If there's a bully, you learn how to handle yourself, how to fight back. But if you're in a situation where everything is positive and supportive and people are encouraging you, I'm wondering, how does a child learn to deal with adversity?
Right. Well, if you know of a place where there's no adversity and everything is smooth, you take me there. I want to live there. Unschooled people are in contact with lots of other people. They get to be in touch with the exact dose of adversity that comes up in their real life. With parents, friends, siblings, you don't need to artificially create an atmosphere of adversity to learn to deal with it. It's the same idea as, you don't choose to work with people that harass you for the sole reason to get accustomed to harassment. Though, of course, if you're a victim of harassment, depending on the type and intensity of the harassment, depending also on the quality of support that you get from your friends or society, you could grow to get stronger. But if your surroundings consider your case as normal and are unsupportive, if your harasser continues day after day to stress you, chances are you'll get weaker and weaker. And no sane person would say you're having a wonderful social experience.
Now, what we see from the film, all the different families involved, whether it's in Germany, the UK, Canada, I noticed that an alternative approach to education is just as much about the parents as it is about the children. And I wondered, how did it make you rethink your role or your job or your profession when it comes to balancing time to helping your child develop? And did it make you rethink your relationship with filmmaking, for example?
Well, it started, I was mainly acting when my son was born, and before even considering homeschooling, unschooling, I think when you have this new person in your life, time becomes more precious, and choices as an actress it was very different. I needed to be really, really very much in love with the project and the values behind it in order to not be with my child. And then I think the hardest, as I was saying earlier, in unschooling is deschooling ourselves. And with that, we become more creative and we find solutions that are completely out of the box. So in my case, there's always been support from the community. There's been the possibility to have my child at work with me. It's really a matter of being creative, but I've even seen single mothers who are unschooling here in Paris, where it seems to be you can't even imagine it, but it's a lot of support, a lot of out-of-the-box thinking.
Yeah, it's certainly a new approach to professionalism. Now, we're moving on to another film that talks about a job. And one idea that this documentary brought up for me is that often homeschooled or unschooled children go on to do things that they genuinely love. Now, this next film is about a profession that most of us would never have considered, I think. Lisa, the film's called Apprentice. Tell us more.
Well, Apprentice takes place in Singapore in a maximum security prison where our protagonist has just been hired, and he's in his late 20s. His background is as a juvenile delinquent who straightened himself out in the military, and he says that the reason he wants to do prison work is to help inmates who want to change, lead better lives. That's what he says, but we gradually learn that his life has been colored by the kind of trauma that you don't easily forget, and he finds himself taken under the wing of the prison hangman, who for over 30 years has been doing this necessary kind of unsavory work, and that's the kind of thing that could bring you to the end of your rope, shall we say? Let's take a look.
Kau dah bila Chief jadi executioner?
34 tahun dah. Aku dah buat lebih 600 kali.
Aku dah jumpa dia.
Siapa?
The hangman.
Orang yang gantung bapak tu. Kau nak buktikan apa ni? Nak kerja dengan dia?
Saya dulu banyak masalah. Panas bara.
Aku nak kau take over jadi asisten aku.
Ika.
Now, when the filmmaker set out to do research to write his script, he assumed he knew what kind of a person a professional executioner would be, and he wrote a script accordingly. And then when he started meeting people who did this work, he found out that they were loving husbands and fathers. They were great with their children. They didn't necessarily take the job home with them. It was just something that was necessary. And the film is fascinating on several levels. It's very instructional. You actually learn how to conduct a, shall we say, humane killing. The length of the rope is absolutely essential vis-a-vis the weight of the person who's going to be hung, and the placement of the noose so that their neck snaps immediately. So, and it's also about how the sins of the father can color all the lives around them.
Right, okay, that's an intriguing film then, so perhaps one if you're more interested in the inner workings of the justice system. Next, on a jollier note, no doubt, the 5th edition of the Champs Elysées Film Festival is about to open here in Paris, coming up from June 7th. So if you're not already here in Paris, you've got time to get here. Clara, when you're in Europe, do you manage to catch the film festivals, the cultural events, things like that?
Well, I have 2 young children now, so it's a bit different. But that's what I love about being here, and especially here in Paris, is the diversity of what's offered on the big screen. It's such a different experience.
Yeah, definitely part of their cultural education, indeed. Now, Lisa, for you, what makes this festival worth the trip?
Well, it's a wonderful opportunity for people who happen to live here or for visitors to get reacquainted with the very nice cinemas up and down the Champs Elysées. It used to be that a producer or distributor would sit in a cafe and they would know whether their film was a success or not by the number of people who bought tickets there. Now they've built cinemas all over town, and that's not so much the case. But it's a very nice place to see a movie. The organizers bill it as a Franco-American event, and they stick to that. You have a lot of independent American films, interesting ones, programmed in competition. And I should emphasize that this is an event that is absolutely for the common man or woman. You don't have to have any qualifications to go. A pass for the entire festival is very economical, and the tickets are about half the price of what things ordinarily are. There's an extensive partnership with my hometown of Chicago, and that's in honor of the 20th anniversary of the Paris-Chicago Committee. So they're bringing in a lot of people who are Chicago personalities, showing some Chicago-centric films and giving a carte blanche to the Chicago International Film Festival. You're probably going to set a record with your movie. That one is founded and still run by the man who's been doing it for 52 years, Michael J. Kutza, who has very interesting taste. And it's fantastic that they're going to be showing for the opening night film, a film called Captain Fantastic, in which Viggo Mortensen plays a man who is homeschooling his 6 beautiful children out in the woods.
And we come back to education. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for that, Lisa, and thank you, Clara, for being with us today. We'll leave you with a clip of Captain Fantastic. Remember to check out our website. We're also on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Hello, Grandpa.
Abby and I have decided that we're going to file for custody of the children.
Will they take us away from you?
That's a possibility.
Our children shall be philosopher kings. Makes me so indescribably happy.
Revisited. Bali, Sarajevo, Havana. France 24 returned to the cities that made the headlines. The inhabitants, the living memory of their communities, tell us about their lives, what has changed and what their lives are like today. Revisited, a remarkable series on France 24.